Awesome. So let's go ahead and get started. So welcome to another week of better planning, better outcome. This is the second to last week. So we have one more week to go. It's been a 20-week series. It's been amazing. Just looking at how to help organizations to go about proving your impact. And funny enough, that's actually one of the things that I'm going to be talking about on my Instagram Live after this. Just this, I guess, this middle ground sort of weird position that a lot of nonprofits are in when it comes to getting funding. So where we want to make a lot of programming about people, but at the same time, you need to make it about numbers to get funding. And so how do you navigate that? So that is one of the things that's going to be coming up a little bit right after this, actually. But to go over just a brief overview of what we've been talking about, we've been going through just identifying just different types of help. And so last week, went over to that last stage of a type of help where it's you're doing, I'm watching, I'm that fly on the wall looking in. I'm not really answering a lot of questions because I know and trust that you all can answer those questions. And then we're also talking in the end. And so there were different questions to identify what type of help or what stage you were in. But that was in the past video. So if you want to go back and look at that, you most definitely can. This week, we're going to be talking about what I mentioned last week, follow-ups, or another way to think about it is follow-throughs. And the reason why I say follow through is because I'm going to use an analogy throughout this. So I guess it's going to be an extended metaphor, if you will. But the metaphor analogy I'm going to use is basketball when it comes to just following through. And I want to use this example because I think it really does stress the importance of following through. And so bear with me as I go through this extended metaphor. But when it comes to basketball, there's a lot of things that everyone knows in terms of technique in order to have a good shot, in order to be successful at shooting. So like some of those things are that your fingertip placement. That's one of the things, like how you're holding the ball, your hand placement, again, how you're holding the ball, your foot placement. Again, are you shoulder width apart in shooting? Are you leaning back? Are you leaning forward? Is your body upright? All those things come into play when it comes to shooting. And so those things end up being the priority above all else. In transitioning to evaluations, it's sort of the same thing. When it comes to evaluations, the things that take priority, at least from our perspective, is the problems that we need to address. So constructing the problem. Why is this the problem? What is the cause of this problem? What are our solutions? Solutions come up. How do we know the solution addresses this problem? And so we talk about that. We talk about the different indicators or the measurements or the statistics, the things that actually get nonprofits and you guys funding. And we talk about the logic models of how to go and make your programming even better. Those are the things that stick out most of all. But transitioning back to the basketball extended metaphor is one thing that we look over and we don't give a lot of sight to: the follow through. It's interesting that when you don't follow through on your shot, well, this is what happens. You have a decrease in accuracy, you have a decrease in consistency, and the flight of the ball is a little bit off. And so speaking from personal experience, a lot of times when I didn't follow through, I would end up missing the shot because of decrease in accuracy, decrease in consistency, and then it was messing up the flight of the ball. And so you would see different professionals, they're working on their follow through. Well, the same principle can be applied when it comes to evaluations, is that it is so important to have a follow-up or a follow-through within this process. And for me, as I go through, I'm going to be expanding on the importance and the reasoning why it is very much so important. And that has to do starting with the accuracy. When we don't have a follow-through and we don't have a follow-up, then our statistics that we use can be inaccurate. Case in point, when you have a statistic that's for 1 year, say 2018, that doesn't mean that that statistic is going to be the same for 2020, and so on and so on. And so when you don't learn how to follow up, or we don't do a follow through or follow up, if you will, well, then it takes away from your accuracy of your statistics, it being updated, because you need to that follow up to continue to have that update statistics. But in addition to that, consistency. So one of the things that is huge is it's one thing to build a habit. It's another thing to keep a habit. And I'm going to say it again. It's one thing to build a habit. It's another thing to keep a habit. And so within this evaluation process, one thing that we were helping you guys do was to build a habit in evaluating your programs. But it's one thing, again, to do that. It's another thing to keep that habit. And a part of keeping the habit is following through. Going back to that shot, the way that you keep that habit is you keep following through over and over again. When it comes to evaluations, all the stuff that you've learned, even though you may have developed a habit of it, that doesn't mean that you're going to remain in that habit. And so the follow-up and the follow-through helps organizations to be able to remain in that habit that they've already developed. I think another thing with this basketball extended metaphor, there's a difference between holding and having a follow-through. There's a difference between holding a follow-through and having a follow-through. So there's players that you'll see that'll have a follow-through and they'll hold it for about 5 seconds. And it's really weird. But they do that because it's training. But then you have these other players that it doesn't seem as if they have a follow-through at all. Well, the reality is that they do. They've just done it so much that it's gotten quicker and quicker and quicker. The same thing can be applied to evaluations. You start out with a follow-through that you're holding it for 5 seconds. And what that means practically is what I do is within that first month, after we've gone through this entire process of working with you and working through the process of evaluations with your organization, in that first month, I get with you every week, once every week within that month to follow up. And then the next month, I do 2 times within that month. And then the next month, I do 1 time in that month because your follow through is getting quicker. And so it starts with that 5 seconds and then goes to what almost seems as if you have no follow through, but you've done it so well that you do have it. It's just unrecognizable to a certain degree for other people. And so that's the method that I like to apply when it comes to assisting you guys in evaluations is within, I don't want you to have to transition from me not being there or us not being there to you being by yourself. I don't know if you've ever felt that, but that is a very hard transition. And we're actually going to talk about that a little bit more because I have an example about that in making that transition. But that is actually what it's going to look like. It's after we've went through this process of me helping you, it's that first month, I'm following up with you every week. And then the next month, then I'm doing it 2 times within that month. And then the third month, I'm doing it 1 time. It's all behind this extended metaphor analogy of just your follow through getting better and better and better. Now let's talk about this transition just for a second. A transition from me being there to me not being present. And I think a great example of that is when I went to college. From my perspective and from my parents' perspective, more from my mother's perspective. My dad sort of wanted me to leave. So there's that, but I still love him. But from my perspective, I went from being in the house, even though all my needs weren't necessarily taken care of. Yes, I was doing different chores. Yes, I was paying for certain things. But honestly, majority of my stuff was taken care of. And so I learned how to go through life needing my parents. And so they sort of taught me how to be independent as I was still dependent on them. But then there was this transition when I went to college where it was, oh my gosh, I no longer have my parents. And so I went from them being around to them not being around. It was almost as if it was like night and day of a switch. In the same way, my mom felt that, where she was like, oh my gosh, my baby's here at one moment, and then he's not here in this next moment. Night and day for her. But here's the thing though, what happens, which is sort of a causal mechanism, sort of middle ground thing, but what happened that helped me make that transition was when they would follow up with me. So what they did was they called me to make sure I was okay. They FaceTimed me. Sometimes they took trips. They were in Texas. I went to school in Virginia. So sometimes they would take a different trip over to really just check in and see how I was doing. And through different bills I was paying, through payments, through different things like that, They would assist me in that regard. In the same way for me, I would check in with my mom, check in with my dad. I would follow up with them. And it helped in making this transition from them being there to, wow, I'm really by myself. I think the same thing can be applied when it comes to evaluations. Going from I'm always around, I'm helping you guys, people are helping you. You need us to help you in evaluating. Maybe it's a different type of help, but there's still a need there to, oh my gosh, you're no longer there. And what helps in that transition and evaluating, because it is an uncomfortable process when you transition, is the follow-up, where it's a continual follow-up. So you don't have to feel that overwhelming, overbearing, oh my gosh, this is completely uncomfortable, because there's a continual follow-up to help you and ease you into the transition rather than making that hard line switch into that transition. So rather than having that light that's just a switch, you're dimming it until the light is no longer existing. And so you can tell I love metaphors, I love analogies, I love examples, and they really do help. But that the point is that it really does help in evaluations that get you guys from really needing help to not needing help, but easing you into that transition. Because again, it's for me working myself out of a job. So there's different questions to think about in that, to just ponder within for yourself and for your organization. I think one question is, what does walking look like for your organization in addressing the problem in the population served? So when I say walking, I mean in needing help. So walking is equated to needing help. So what does needing help look like for your organization in addressing the problem in the population you're serving? So what does walking look like? And so you want to look at, what does that look like for your organization? Again, we've talked about different types of help, different types of needs. And so again, it's sort of just a snapshot back to those different sessions that we've talked about. But the next question you want to ask yourself is, what does running look like for your organization in addressing these problems in the population you're serving? So running as in equatable to not needing any help. So what does running look like in not needing my help? Not needing really a lot of people's help when it comes to evaluating your programs. What does that look like? And then one of my favorite questions, because it really talks about the things that are getting in the way, is what would get in the way of your organization going from walking to running? So what would get in the way of your organization going from needing help to not needing help? What are the roadblocks? And there can be different roadblocks. For me personally, what I've seen within organizations and even within myself when I started doing evaluations was that there was this mental roadblock in the beginning where I was at a place of, I don't know if I can do this by myself. I don't know if it's possible. I had really just a lack of belief in myself. And some of these organizations had a lack of belief in themselves. Well, the reality is, if I have assisted you properly, well, then you should believe in yourself because you're ready. And so there is that belief in yourself that you can do it. But that's a mental roadblock that comes up. And you want to be able to identify what those are for you specifically, because they will come up. It is inevitable when you transition from needing help to not needing help. And so the point of the follow-ups is to prepare you for that transition. That's a lot of what's going to be talking about within that first month and every week. And then that next month, those 2 times, and that last month with that 1 time, is helping you guys with the transition. But it's not only talking about it, it's actually showing you. It's giving you an example. The example is you go from 4 to 2 to 1 time. And each time you're going to feel a different level of uncomfortability. And you're going to work through that. And that's going to be to the same thing that you're going to feel when I'm not present, which is okay. And so there's mental roadblocks that you want to figure out, but it also may be physical roadblocks. There may be the physical roadblocks of you just don't have the capacity as an organization to do this by yourself. That's and evaluate your programs by yourself. That may be just a legitimate physical roadblock of you cannot go to not needing somebody because you're sort of just doing it solo in isolation. And so that is a physical roadblock when it comes to evaluations. And it's important just to identify those, not to take away from your progress, but to know that these are things that may get in the way, and to ultimately figure out, if this is going to get in the way, how can I maybe be proactive rather than reactive and address these things that could possibly come up? And so that's why that question is really important. But the point of this time, again, is just going back to follow-ups or follow-throughs are really important. And that's why I do them. After all of our time within our individual sessions that we do and assisting you guys and everything, I want to help you all to be able to ease that transition to not needing any help. And that comes with doing follow-ups. And just like going back to the extended metaphor with basketball, as it does take away when you don't follow through, it does take away from the accuracy, the consistency, the actual travel of the ball. Well, in the same way, it will take away when we don't have follow-ups, it does take away from those same things, just in evaluation sense. And so that is why I do stress, and even in this session, will take the time and have taken the time to stress the importance of follow-ups and follow-throughs. So next time, the last session we're going to talk about is worth the time. And so within these individual sessions that I do, it takes about 15 weeks. 15 weeks for me to work with your entire organization to figure out and come up with an evaluation plan and understand the problem and understand the solution that you have, and go about this entire process of the fishbone diagram and all encompassing, really. And it takes about 15 weeks. And the reason why I'm going to talk about that and not shy away from it is 15 weeks so that 15 years you'll be fine. 15 weeks leading to 15 years of you knowing how to really go about evaluating your programs. And so that's something I'm going to take the time to do, because it's really important to really just take that time of, oh my gosh, if I really just singularly focus on these 15 weeks, well, where could it go after that? And so that's what I'm going to take the time to talk about next week, which will be our last week. And then after that, I will very much so be doing just different things on Instagram Live for right now on my social media platform, just posting stuff every single week, just of different things that are really just necessary just to learn. And then following that, there will be a different session that'll be coming up again, another virtual series. But for right now, next week, we're going to talk about, again, worth the time. And this week, again, just as a reminder, it was about the importance of follow-ups and follow-throughs. Awesome. So now I am open to any questions.
What's your Instagram handle?
Yeah, so Focus Grants. I can write it.
Focus Grants. Okay.
Yeah. A pretty easy one. I made sure to make it easy this time.
And yeah, I thought you answered a lot of my questions that I had.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, you answered them right there, especially when you're talking about what would get in the way of walking to running. And that really, you made that very clear, and it's a lot to think about.
Yeah, very much so. Definitely taking some time to reflect on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of times we don't. We sort of shy away from it. We don't want to know, but that's the hard part is when you don't want to know and then it comes up and it's like, now I have to actually address this. So
yes. And that is very much where I am now with even with our camp. You know, it's like trying to go back and find all these records and and evaluate things from 2 years ago. It's like, come on.
Yeah. I definitely get it. I'm actually doing that. So the same day pay program, because they already started it and they just brought me in to like evaluate it. So I'm creating the evaluation, but I still have to go back and actually get that information. But the cool thing about it, to encourage you with that, is one of the things I'm doing is I'm looking at how much impacts they were able to have without funding, and then how much impact they were able to have at the start of their funding. And so what that does is it'll be able to show the story of hey, listen, we were having the impact without your funding. But at the same time, your funding did this. So there's this balance of we need you, but we really don't need you.
Right.
So we're going to have this impact either way. And that's nothing wrong with saying that, because there is this confidence of, you know, we do need you, but you need us. Sort of the same way in an interview. I go into an interview and it's not in an arrogant sort of cocky way, overly confident, but more of a, no, you see the value in me, so why should I not see value in myself?
Right.
And so sort of in the same way. And so that's what we're doing. I'm helping them with that story of, well, let's figure out what you did before funding, and then with funding, now with this. And then now we'll be able to, from that story, take, when you're able to get this level of funding, this is what we'll be able to do. And we just meet that. And so that's what I'm doing now. So you're not alone in that.
Okay. I'm looking forward to being able to make that comparison.
Yeah.
You know, without funding and with funding, because I think I told you before, we're pretty much self-funded, you know, for the last 15 years, or just, you know, small fundraiser type things, just enough to get us over, you know, to make sure we're covering all the costs. And now we're all sort of looking towards what we can do, and we can do so much more, but we need to start evaluating some things so we can tell people what we're doing and not just know it for ourselves. So
yeah, very much so, especially when you're able to get to a place where you know rather than feel that you have such an impact, and then you're able to present it to a donor. And this is the statement I live for. You're doing this without funding. That's the statement you want. Kim had that statement a lot of times when she started presenting this stuff. And that's the statement that's when you know you have somebody. When they say, really? You did this all without money? Yeah, we did. Or you did this all by yourself? Okay. And that shows a lot of initiative. That's the statement you want to look out for. When you get that statement, oh man, you're good to go. Yeah, you're good to go after that. It's pretty much downhill from there.
My ears will be pricked, ready to hear it.
Yeah, I live for that statement. That is the most encouraging statement. Oh man.
I am encouraged, regardless. Without that statement, I am encouraged just by everything you've done, and I'm looking forward to being able to put a lot of this stuff into practice.
Yeah, for sure. And please let me know if you need help with that. I will love to.
Oh, I will. So that's all my questions.
Awesome. Well, yeah, have an amazing day.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah, and I will make sure just to send the video out for you for next week.
Yes, thank you. All right, have a great day.
All right, have a great day.